In this final outcome, we look at the raw material of any project, your sources, and how to pick ones that are reliable and to justify why each one earns its place. Let's start with why sources matter so much. A research project stands entirely on its evidence, and that evidence comes from your sources. Good ones make your background credible and your conclusions trustworthy. And in computing, where information dates so quickly, choosing current and reliable material is essential. Picture citing a security tip from 10 years ago that's since been proven unsafe. This outcome asks you not just to list your sources, but to justify why each one is genuinely appropriate. Sources come in a few distinct types, and it's worth knowing them apart. A primary source is original material, like a research paper reporting new results, or your own collected data. A secondary source reviews or discusses that primary work, such as a textbook or a literature review. A tertiary source points you elsewhere. Think of an encyclopedia or a database index. And then there's grey literature, useful material that hasn't been peer-reviewed, like technical reports, standards, or vendor documentation. Not all sources carry the same weight, so it helps to picture a reliability pyramid. Right at the top sit peer-reviewed journal and conference papers, prized for their authority. Just below, standards, RFCs, and official documentation are highly reliable for technical facts. Books and professional bodies like the BCS are strong and stable too. Down at the base are blogs, forums, and vendor marketing, which can still be useful but need careful checking before you lean on them. A key distinction to hold on to is academic versus non-academic sources. Academic or scholarly work is written by researchers and reviewed by experts, found in places like IEEE Explore and the ACM Digital Library, and it cites its own evidence, which makes it ideal for background, theory, and rigorous results. Non-academic sources, news sites, blogs, forums, and vendor pages are quick and current, but not peer-reviewed, so they may be biased or simply wrong. Use them with care and check their claims against something stronger. So where does computing knowledge actually live? The digital libraries, IEEE Explore, and the ACM Digital Library hold most computing research. Professional bodies like the BCS offer guidance and standards, while official documentation from the likes of Microsoft, Linux, Oracle, and the W3C publishes authoritative technical detail. Standards and RFCs from ISO, IEEE, and the IETF define how technologies really work. And preprints and datasets on sites like Archive can be useful too, as long as you check them carefully. Let me give you a quick map of the key computing sources and what each is best for. AMI IEEE Explore gives you peer-reviewed papers and standards, ideal for rigorous evidence and background. The ACM Digital Library offers computing papers and proceedings, great for recent research. The BCS provides professional guidance and ethics, so it's your go-to for good practice and the code of conduct. Official docs give accurate technical facts, and Archive offers very recent preprints, which you treat cautiously because they aren't yet peer-reviewed. It's worth understanding what peer review actually means, because it's why some sources sit at the top. Peer review is when other experts check a paper before it's published, filtering out weak methods and unsupported claims, and that raises your trust in the result. A peer-reviewed source is usually far stronger evidence than a blog making exactly the same claim. So if a journal paper and a random forum post disagree about, say, an encryption method, the reviewed paper carries the weight. A really handy tool for sizing up any source is the CRAP test. The letters stand for 5 quick checks: currency, how recent it is and whether that matters here; relevance, whether it actually addresses your question; authority, who wrote it and whether they're credible; accuracy, whether the evidence is sound and checkable; and purpose, whether it's there to inform you or to sell and persuade. Run any source through those 5 and you'll quickly spot the weak ones. Let's unpack that test a little more fully. Currency is the date, and in a fast-moving field, even a 5-year-old benchmark may already be out of date. Relevance is how closely the source fits your specific question and level. Authority is the author's or publisher's credentials and reputation. Accuracy is whether the claims are supported by evidence and can actually be verified. And purpose is why it was written, to inform, to teach, or simply to advertise a product. Here's the CRAPE test in action. A learner finds a manufacturer's web page claiming its solid-state drive is 10 times faster than any hard drive. On currency, it's recent, which is good. On relevance, it's on topic, but it compares against unnamed drives. On authority, it's the manufacturer, so knowledgeable but hardly independent. On accuracy, that 10 times figure comes with no test conditions, so it's hard to verify. And on purpose, it exists to sell, so the learner uses the claim cautiously and checks it against an independent benchmark. Official documentation and standards deserve a special mention. They're authoritative for how a technology is defined and how it behaves. Think IETF RFCs for Internet protocols, the W3C for web standards, or ISO for security. Vendor documentation from Microsoft, Linux, or Oracle is reliable for product features and configuration. These sit high on the reliability scale, but do remember they can still carry a vendor's viewpoint, so it's worth noting where a source has an interest. Blogs and forums are a different matter, though not off limits. Sites like Stack Overflow, GitHub, and vendor blogs can be genuinely useful and wonderfully current. The catch is that they're not peer-reviewed, so treat them as leads rather than proof. Check who wrote the post, whether it's dated, and whether the claim is actually backed by evidence, then confirm anything important against a stronger source before you rely on it. Grey literature is allowed in your project, but its weight has to match its reliability. Currency really bites in computing because the field moves so fast, hardware, software versions, and best practice all shift quickly. A source that was spot on 5 years ago may now be flat wrong, old security advice being a classic example. So generally, you should prefer recent sources for technology and current practice. That said, older sources still have real value for stable theory, like how a sorting algorithm fundamentally works, which doesn't change with the latest release. Bringing this to life, here's a source justification table for the Drive project. The learner records that an IIEE Explore paper on flash storage is peer-reviewed and authoritative, so it's used for background theory. An independent tech site benchmark is current and relevant, used to compare against their own results. The vendor datasheet is accurate on specifications, though its promotional purpose is noted. And Dawson's textbook on projects in computing is a trusted guide for the method. Each entry names the source, its type, and one clear reason it earns its place. A credible project never rests on a single type of source. You want a balanced range: papers, books, standards, official docs, and reputable web material, giving the most weight to the most reliable ones. The reason is simple. A mix lets you compare and cross-check claims rather than taking anyone at face value. So a password habits study might combine an academic survey, a standards body's guidance, and a reputable security blog, each doing a different job. That range also helps you handle bias. Every source has a viewpoint, and drawing on several lets you see past any single one. This is where triangulation comes in, checking a claim against 2 or more independent sources. So you might confirm a vendor's speed claim with an independent benchmark and then your own test. And if your sources happen to disagree, that's not a problem to hide. It's actually worth discussing openly in your write-up. None of this counts, though, without proper referencing and academic honesty. Record the full details of every source as you go, the author, year, title, and where you found it, and reference in Harvard style so readers can trace your sources and you steer clear of plagiarism. Remember that quoting or paraphrasing without a citation is plagiarism, even when it's completely unintentional. Good referencing does double duty too, quietly showing the range and quality of the sources you chose. Before you finish, run through a quick checklist to justify your sources. Have you used a genuine range of types, not just websites? Is each source current enough for such a fast-moving field? Can you say, in a single sentence, why each one is appropriate? Have you checked authority, accuracy, and purpose with the CRAP test? And have you cross-checked your key claims and referenced everything in Harvard style? If you can justify every source, your evidence base is strong and defensible. Let's pull this outcome together. Your sources are the evidence base of the project, so their quality decides its credibility. Peer-reviewed papers, standards, and official docs are the most authoritative, while blogs and forums sit at the bottom. The key computing sources to know are IEEE Explore, the ACM Digital Library, the BCS, and vendor documentation. Evaluate everything with the CRAP test, and then use a balanced range, triangulate your key claims, reference in Harvard style, and justify each choice you make. And that completes planning a research project. You now have a full toolkit, a negotiated title, a clear method, and a well-chosen, well-justified set of sources. If you'd like to read further, Dawson and Oates both cover evaluating sources for computing work, while study skills guides like Bell and Waters and Cottrell are excellent on referencing and avoiding plagiarism. For the sources themselves, spend time in IEEE Explore and the ACM Digital Library, and look at the BCS Code of Conduct for the ethics side. Everything you need is on the Moodle for this unit, so do explore it as you build your own proposal.